The organizational structure of the OAU. First, there was the assembly. The heads of state and government formed the assembly. The head of the assembly was called the chairperson. The position rotated among the heads of state and government. So it met every 2 years to discuss general matters. The host country assumed chairmanship until the next meeting. Decisions were reached after a 2/3 majority. So that is the assembly. The heads of state, the presidents were were forming the assembly like the parliament, and there the chairmanship, the leadership of that one was rotating in every 2 years, and every 2 years changing that leadership. Functions of the assembly: to admit new members to the body, and also to discuss and make decisions. They were there to discuss and make decisions there. Also to discuss and make decisions on international problems from Council of Ministers, and to elect members of the Council for mediation, conciliation, and arbitration. So they were there to elect a council that would be there. Maybe if there is a conflict, then they could elect to say who is going to chair this thing. Then they could appoint to say, all right, this country and this country and this country, they are going to mediate on this problem over these countries. The Council of Ministers, apart from the Assembly, there was also the Council of Ministers. It was made of foreign ministers of member states who met twice annually at a convenient time. So foreign ministers of each and every country, they were meeting twice a year. Functions of the organ or this Council of Ministers was to prepare the agenda for the meeting by heads of state, and also to approve the annual budget of the OAU, and to prepare conferences of the assembly. Also to coordinate inter-Africa cooperation. So you can see this Council of Ministers, it had really a very big job preparing for the meeting of head of states, that is preparing for the assembly and making the budget, and conferences, to prepare for the conferences, and inter-Africa, to coordinate cooperation in Africa. Then there was also the Council for Mediation, Conciliation, and Arbitration. Its membership was limited to 21 people, each from a separate member state of OAU. They were elected by heads of state for a 5-year term. The function of the organ of this one, the Council for Mediation, Conciliation, and Arbitration. They were there to settle disputes among member countries through mediation, economic sanctions, as well as collective defense. So they were there to do such issues. The Secretariat was also another organ of the OAU. It is headed by the Secretary General with its permanent headquarters in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. He or she, that is the Secretary General, was elected by heads of state for 4-year term. Functions of the Secretariat: to coordinate the activities of the OAU in all its agenda and commissions. For example, economy, culture, politics, education, and many others. And also to summon member states to meetings, and also to prepare an agenda for the meeting, to prepare and present an annual budget to the Council of Ministers for approval. So the Secretariat, it was like the central administrative office. Another organ of the OAU was the specialized commissions and agencies. The OAU had different commissions responsible for various functions. For example, there was the Mediation Commission, the Mediation Commission, Defense Commission, Health and Sanitation Commission, and the Liberation Commission. So they were different agencies that were commissioned to do or responsible for various functions at a particular time. Commissions had the following functions. Number one, to promote African culture through education and cultural visits among member states, and also to improve people's living standards through good health programs and by uprooting the root causes of socio-economic problems, and also to foster security among African countries. Not only that, they are there to liberate African countries from colonization. So we see to it, the commissions, they were carrying out different agendas at a particular time when they were appointed. But now let us look at the successes. What were the successes and failures of the Organization of African Unity? Let's start with the successes. Number one, liberation of African countries from colonial rule. That is, the OAU supported liberation groups in Zimbabwe, the ZANU, ZAPU, and also in Namibia, the SWAPO, South Africa, the ANC, and PAC, they did that one. So the liberation of African countries from colonial rule. So they supported the liberation groups like nationalistic or nationalist movements, the ZANU, the ZAPU, SWAPO, in different countries. And also the establishment of the African Development Bank, ADB, in 1964 to foster economic and social development of African countries. So they established the African Development Bank to assist in economic development of different countries. And also repatriation of refugees under the United Nations High Commissioner for the refugees, UNHCR. So they also assisted in bringing back the refugees to their home countries with the assistance of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. And also, another success was the OAU managed to isolate South Africa and put pressure on her to end apartheid rule and introduce democracy. Some of the sanctions including breaking diplomatic relations, closure of African harbors to South African ships, and closure of airports and airspace to South African planes. So you see to it, they pressurized South Africa to end apartheid, that rule or discriminatory rule which was there in South Africa. So what they did was that South African ships were not allowed to go into other African countries. Even aeroplanes from South Africa, they were not allowed to go to land into other African countries. As a result, things were not okay with South Africa because they were only related with the European countries. And they also succeeded, the OAU also succeeded in settling of disputes among African countries. For example, between Algeria and Morocco, between 1964 and 1965, Somalia and Ethiopia border disputes in 1965, working for peace in DRC, Rwanda, Burundi, and Darfur. So we see to it that the OAU managed to settle the disputes in different countries. We are sure that even our dispute, when it is brought before the African Union, it is going to be solved. And also representing African interests worldwide through the UNO and Secretary General like Boutros Ghali. So they represented the African interests worldwide through the United Nations Organization and Secretary General like Boutros Ghali. He became the Secretary General of the United Nations. Not only that, Kofi Annan from Ghana, he also became the Secretary General from 1997 to 2009. And also it encouraged cooperation among African states, which was necessary for development of the member states. And also it fostered the human rights among Africans if infringed by the non-Africans worldwide. So we see there were so many successes of the Organization of African Unity. But there were also some failures. What were the failures? The OAU failed to enforce its decision due to disunity among the member states. The example is while other member states were worked to isolate South Africa, Dr. Banda of Malawi established diplomatic ties with the apartheid regime. Look at that now. Malawi is mentioned now to contribute to the failures of the OAU. But this time around, we need the OAU to assist us in solving our problems with Tanzania. Look at that. Dr. Banda did that. He established the relations with South Africa. And again, failure to end civil wars and massacres as members were barred by the OAU Charter that prohibits them in interfering in the internal affairs of another country. So innocent people have been killed in Nigeria, 1967, 1970, Uganda, 1971, 1979, Burundi, 1972, Rwanda, the Rwandan genocide, 1993 to 1994, Zimbabwe, 2000 to 2006, without any action from the OAU. So we see to it that the OAU, they could not intervene in the issues whereby things were out of hand in some of the countries, just as we have mentioned here. So it has been overruled by the rich African countries like Libya, Morocco, and Nigeria, who always choose to veto some of its decisions. So those rich countries always, they reject, they veto. To veto is to oppose an established or an agreed point, to say we are going to do this action. Then you find that one country says no, this one no, we are not going to do this, then that one fails. Also, social services such as health, infrastructure, education remained poor on the continent. The OAU failed to bring about real political unity in Africa. And also it failed to enhance unity among member states due to wide membership and different cultural affiliations. Hence, unity failed. It failed to operate its offices and activities due to lack of funds. Its undemocratic representation. Critics of the structure of the OAU argue that it did not represent the people of Africa. It was controlled by the rulers of member countries, some of whom were self-appointed and did not represent the views of the people over whom they ruled. So this one, it was like an undemocratic because we see to it that in most countries, those leaders, they were dictators, and as a result, they were not representing the real views of their people back home. Factors for the failures of the OAU or problems faced by the OAU: lack of funds for its operation, lack of permanent army to enforce order among African states, also cultural differences among the member states. North African states were culturally Arabic and pursued Islam, whereas sub-Saharan states are mostly Christian countries that are pro-Western. So we see to it that cultural differences also contributed to the failures of the OAU. Also, ideological differences. Some countries within the OAU adopted socialist policies and maintained strong links with the communist countries of Eastern Europe. For example, Sekou Toure, Kwame Nkrumah, and Julius Nyerere. Others maintained strong links with the capitalist countries of Western Europe and USA. For example, Cote d'Ivoire, DRC, Malawi. So this division weakened the organization. To say, at the international level, countries were divided, the communist and the capitalist. Then that one again, it was also reflected in Africa, where African countries, some supported capitalism, others communism. Also, formation of the regional groupings. So the unity of the OAU was also threatened by the regional groupings among member states. So the main example is the Arab League, to which many North African states belonged. So the regional groupings now started to appear, like in Southern Africa, Northern Africa, and anywhere. That one again, it also weakened the the Organization of African Unity. So why the OAU changed to African Union? Today, we don't have the Organization of African Unity. It has changed its name now. It is called the African Union. Why did it change that name? Number one was, the main reason was that for the change was the need to have a new approach in solving continental problems. So they wanted to have a new approach. So how do they address that? By changing their name so that they are known by a different name. The OAU had some inherent weaknesses that rendered it ineffective. So the OAU, it was like it had many weaknesses. So they wanted to restructure everything and make sure that they address those weaknesses. So one of it was to change the name. So some of its weaknesses of the OAU included had no security council and the army to enforce its orders, and also a clause that stated that member states could not interfere in each other's affairs, denied OAU to settle wars, impose sanctions, and remove irresponsible leaders from power. So we see to it that that agreement, which they said member states, they had no authority to interfere in others' affairs. Therefore, that one, it meant that the OAU itself could not maybe impose sanctions in a country, or maybe remove irresponsible leaders from power. For example, we have just mentioned Dr. Banda here to say African countries, they agreed to say we need to sideline this South Africa because of apartheid. Then Dr. Banda, Malawi was a member of the OAU, at the same time established diplomatic ties with South Africa. The OAU was supposed to ban or to remove or to impose sanctions on Malawi, to say, because you have done this, Malawi again, we are doing this, and that. So they failed because of that clause to say they could not interfere on the affairs of each member states. The OAU was criticized also a lot on simply being on talking club and never implementing the resolution. So the OAU was taken as a talking club, to say people were just talking now and again. So people did not want that. They wanted to see things happening on the ground. So another weakness was that it needed a restructure. It needed restructuring for it to be stronger. So they wanted to restructure the OAU. That's why they changed the name. So the African Union was established in Durban on 9th July 2002 with its first chairman by the name Thabo Mbeki. The African Union comprised of all independent African countries. South Sudan joined on 28th July 2002. Morocco rejoined in 2017. What were the aims of the OAU, of the AU now, African Unity? To promote unity and peace among African countries, and also to encourage democracy and good governance, also to encourage sustainable development, and also, these were the major three aims. And the official language for the African Unity are English, Arabic, Portuguese, and French. Those are regarded as the official languages. The African Union is expected to be a much stronger organization than the OAU. So this is because it has made improvements on the principles of the defunct, that is OAU. For example, the right to intervene in a member state in a case of crisis or conflict. The fact which was not available during the time of OAU. And also, the new organization has also emphasized on the respect of human rights, democratic principles, and good governance. And also, it has committed to the promotion of social justice and gender equality. However, this African Union faces a number of challenges, including poverty and debts.